Hello friends, it's Shari, and today I am sharing these mini felt heart ornaments that I created. These use Poshta Design's stitching dies, and I'm making 3 of them in the video today. Every one of these starts with the small heart from the basic heart die set, and then each one of them has some additional embellishments. For this one, I used the Lovely Layers Details die set. This die only cuts the holes, but you use the shape of the die to line these up with your heart that you've already cut. So this will cut just the holes across the bottom of the scallop design. And then the other die in this set will cut the shape as well as the holes, and then these 2 pieces will layer together and all of those little holes will line up perfectly. Again, for this one, I started with 2 of the mini basic hearts. Then I pulled out the Floral Heart Details die. This one again will just cut the holes and you use the overall shape of the die to line it up with your heart. It will cut the holes for you to do some detail stitching along the side of the heart. And it will come with a sheet to show you exactly how to stitch those details. In addition to the little lazy daisy stitches, we're going to cut a small flower as well as this little button shape, and these will layer onto the heart as well. Now this is a great opportunity to pull out some of those buttons and embellishments you may have. So on my heart today, I'll be trading out that little felt button shape for a real button. For the other part of this heart, I use the scalloped heart details, and of course I'm using the small one for this. It will cut that scalloped heart shape and the stitching holes. These stitching holes line up perfectly with the basic heart. For my third ornament, I cut the 2 basic hearts as well as 2 layers of the Cupid's arrow detail die to layer them together to kind of make that arrow a little more stable. I also used the tail and the head of the arrow and cut 2 sets of these from this darker aqua color. So I have 2 heads and 2 tails, and these will layer on those lighter aqua pieces. Now I did not want this Cupid's arrow heart to be too plain, so I will add some embellishments to it. I do have this light pink heart cut with the embroidered heart vines detail die set. This is just the really small heart that is meant to layer onto the small heart details. This is also a great opportunity to pull out a cute heart button or some kind of other embellishment. Now for all of my stitching, I always separate my threads and only use 3 strands of floss. So we have 6 strands and I'm going to split this in half. For all of my projects today, I am using the Love Bug color story from Poshta Design with the addition of that little bit of purple that you see there. So the color stories at Poshta Design come with the matching DMC floss as well as a pack of beads and sequins that match the colors as well. Now when we put our hearts together, we always want to do whatever decorating and embellishing we're doing to the front first. I like to line up the holes, and I know it's hard to see, but I can see the light through the holes and make sure they're lined up. So I hold it up to the light on my desk, and I'm stitching across this scallop detail on the bottom first. Now my tail for this is going to be hidden on the inside, so I can just hold this with my finger while I do my stitching. And to make my stitches nice and even, I like to do a running stitch all the way across. So I'm skipping each stitch, going through every hole up and down and up and down, and then I'll work my way back across. And I will speed things up throughout this video so that it does not take too long, but you can always slow it down if you need to. Once I get to the other end, you can see I've done every other stitch. I will go back in the other direction and fill them in the other direction. You could do a traditional back stitch here, but this is kind of the method you're going to use to put the 2 pieces together and do the ornament, so I just stick with the same technique. Now we are going to put our 2 pieces together, but first I want to stuff it. And the easiest way I think to stuff it is to take my die, I'm tracing around the inside, so inside the holes, onto a piece of quilt batting, And then I'll just cut this out. This does not have to be perfect, but this is going to be smaller than the holes and will fill it nicely. And to me, especially on a piece that is this small, this is much easier to do than trying to stuff polyfill in there. Because when you do that, you do have to sew partly around, then stuff it, and then sew some more. Now I did cut 2 of these. I decided that was a little bit too lofty for this because it is so small. So I'll just take one out and set it aside for one of my other hearts. I am going to go ahead and make myself a little hanger. So I have some thin yarn that I use for hangers. I just have white. You could get any color. I've cut a length and I'm tying a knot at the bottom, making sure it's not too long. I'll cut off the tails past my knot, and then I'm doing this now so I can go ahead and put it inside. So inside we want to layer our batting and our hanger. And I like to put just a dot of glue to kind of hold it in place while I'm working. And then I will layer the other heart on top. Now I did not tie off my string here, but I am going to, just so that it doesn't let loose. But I'm not going to cut it off because I'm going to use this same piece of floss to stitch all the way around my heart. Okay, now that I have that tied off, I'm going to layer my 2 hearts together. Now when you're layering these pieces together, you want to start your floss between the pieces. And this works out perfect because my floss is already between my 2 hearts from stitching the detail on the front. So it's coming out from in between my 2 pieces. And I'm just going to line up the holes and then start as if I went straight from that purple straight out the back of the heart. Then I will use the same stitching method that I did to go across the scallop detail and work my way all the way around my heart, going in and out, skipping each line, and then I will work my way back and fill them in. So when I get to the hanger here, I do want to make sure that it's kind of separated, and through that center hole, I made sure I went through my hanger, and that will help secure it into place. And of course, I'm speeding this up so you can see me do my running stitch all the way around my heart. And these actually do stitch up pretty quick because they're nice and small, so they would be some really cute things to give to a friend. So now I've made it back to where I started, and I'm going to go through that hole where I started, and then I'm going to start working my way back, filling in those spaces that I didn't do before. So we're going back the other direction. And this leaves some nice stitches on the front and the back, because when you have a project like this, you will see both the front and the back, so you want to make sure that the stitches are nice on both sides. If you were just stitching this onto something where you're never going to see the back, you could probably do a traditional back stitch to stitch this on there. So I'm working my way back around to that starting point again, and it really doesn't matter where you start. Of course, for this one, I started where I had left off on the detail that I stitched on the front. And then when I get back to where I'm ending, I'm going to go through, make sure I do my last stitch that I'm going to see, which is on the back. You can see the front is full. So when I do this one, I want to make sure that my needle comes out in between my 2 layers of my heart. Hopefully you can see that there where I'm pulling that out between the 2 layers. Now normally I have a tail and I'll tie these 2 together and then thread the end through my heart. But for this one, because I left my tail inside of the heart, what I'm going to do is just carefully put my needle up underneath some stitches like this. Going underneath, and then I will tie it off in a couple knots. That knot is going to hide down between those 2 layers of felt. And then once I tie that knot, I can thread my needle in, and I'm going to come out somewhere in the middle of my heart, just like this. I'll pull it really tight, trim it really close, and that's going to make that tail stay inside. And look at that cute little heart, isn't it just adorable? So I'm moving on to the next one. Now this one has some stitching details, so I'm pulling out my instructions here to show me where those little lazy daisies go, because when you look at this and all those little holes, it can be pretty confusing. So I'm really glad that Lizzie adds in this detailed diagram to help you out when you get these stitching dies. So I can see that I have 3 lazy daisies at the top, and I'm kind of looking at them and mapping out where the bottom of the lazy daisy goes and where the top. So I'm going to come up through the bottom hole, then I'll go back through the bottom hole, leave myself a loop, and then I'm going to come up through the top hole inside of that loop, creating that lazy daisy stitch, and then you want to go back through the top hole on the other side so that it holds your thread in place. And I'll just speed this up so you can see me do all of these stitches. You do want to make sure that you don't pull them too tight so that you don't pull them back through the hole. You want to kind of keep them loose so you get that look of a flower petal. So in that top corner, there are 3 of those little stitches. You can see that I'm matching my diagram. And then at the bottom, there are 5. So I'm just looking again at my holes, figuring out where the base of that petal stitch is and where the top is going to be. And then I'll start here with this one. This is the one that's on the far left at the bottom. Again, coming up through one hole, going back through the same hole, but leaving a loop to come up through, and then going back on the other side of that loop to hold it in place. Now I didn't show you all of those stitches, of course, because we've already repeated that, but now I'm on to my last one here. And then once I have this one on, I will loosely tie this off on the back. The back is a big hot mess, but it's fine because it's going to be hidden inside of our heart. Now to add my little flower embellishment. Those 4 little holes in the center of the flower line up with 4 holes that the die cuts in the heart. And then I'm adding the button to mine. You could add the felt cut button as well. Now I'm going up through my flower first because I think it's easiest to see this way, and I'll just hold the tail with my finger, and then I'm going to add my button. And you just need to do 2 stitches on this to hold it in place. This is just a decorative button. You don't need any more than that because it's not a functional button on our clothes, so we don't need to make sure it's going to come off. And then I'll tie it off on the back of the heart and trim off the tails. So now it's time to layer our pieces together, and I have that little piece of batting that I had before and didn't end up using. I'm going to layer that between my heart and my scallop heart, and then I'm using just a few dots of glue to hold these in place while I work because I am going to have quite a few layers. So I'm just holding this up and lining up those holes. I'm making a hanger again like I did on the first one. And I'm going to layer the hanger behind this scallop layer. I think you could layer 2 of these together, but it worked out really nicely to just have the one. I'm already stitching through 3 layers of felt. Now, since I'm starting between my layers, I can easily start before I align that heart on the back. And I'm starting in the center on this one. And I made sure that my first stitch went between the 2 pieces of the hanger. Then I can take my thread and line up this back heart. And since this is the back, I'm not really too concerned about having any batting between these 2 layers. And I'm just doing the same thing I did before, except you're going to see on this one, I ended up just leaving it going around my heart once. I like to go around the heart and then decide if I like the look of every other stitch or if I want to go back and fill it in. And for this one, since I'm using a thread that matches my heart instead of a contrasting one, I kind of liked the look of just every other stitch being filled in. As I'm working my way around the heart, you can see on this one, because I am sewing through 3 layers this time, plus that batting thickness in there, I am flipping it over a lot to make sure I hit that hole on the back and my stitches on the back stay nice and pretty. So now I've gotten around to where I started, and I decided I liked the look of every other stitch, so I actually need to pull my thread out between that dark pink heart and the light pink scallop and then tie it off. Then I'll take my needle and thread that through just like I did before, through the center of the heart somewhere, pull it taut and trim off the tail. Now, because I have 2 tails on this one, which I did not have on the first one, I am going to thread that second tail into my needle after it's tied off and do the same thing. And then here is that cute little scallop heart. That one might be my favorite of this little trio. Moving on to the third one here, just like everything else, we want to add our embellishments before we start sewing all of our pieces together. So I'm sewing on this little light pink heart. Again, this is a perfect opportunity to pull out a cute little button or something that's in your stash. I'm going to tie this off and trim off the tails. I am adding some beads, however, but for my beads, I changed needles, so I had one with a very small eye and would fit through the bead, and I'm only using 1 strand of floss for my beads. So I've put 1 on there. I'm tying it off after I have that 1 in place. Then I will pull my thread down, and I'm making sure I don't pull it too taut. I want that heart to stay nice and flat. And I am struggling slightly to get my beads out of here. I wish I had picked them up with a jewel picker and pulled them out, but I finally got it. You want to come up through your felt, through your bead, and then back through the felt on the other side of the bead so that it holds it in place. And once I have all 3 of those on there, I'll just tie this off and trim off the thread. I'm putting that little thin needle back into my little case, and I'm going back to my bigger one to put all my pieces together. Now, because I have these little tiny pieces that I want to stitch on here, and I want to stitch them together with the other side, I'm using my little glue trick here to add some tiny dots of glue to hold them in place. I'll do the same to this side, and you're going to see here in a minute why I'm doing this, because I'm going to flip this over and sandwich them together, and I don't want to lose my pieces out the back side. And I'm just stitching from the heart edge out to the tip of the arrow, and then I'll do the same at the tail of the arrow, and I'll just do a running stitch out to the tip, which is only about 3 stitches, and then I'll come back with the other 2. So I'm ignoring the heart right now, and I'm just stitching the arrow part. And then for this, I will come back through the center, which is actually where I started. I did forget to say that. And I'll tie this off. So this knot and this tail will be inside between my 2 pieces of felt. So once I have these 2 trimmed off, I'll use the same needle and thread, and I'll do the tail of the arrow. Let me line these back up. Again, I'm going to start in between my 2 pieces. So I'm going to come up in between them, so my tail is between my 2 felt pieces, and do my running stitch out to the end. Then I'll come back to where I started, and end between the 2 felt pieces. So I'm coming up in between. My string got caught around the tail there. I was just unhooking it, and then I'll tie off these 2 pieces. And this will get hidden between my 2 big hearts. So again, these tails will just live inside these 2 hearts. Now for this one, I decided to not do any batting because I'm already stitching through 4 layers of felt because I have 2 for the middle and then the 2 outside hearts. But again, because I have so many pieces, I'm using my little dots of glue to hold my hearts in place as I do my stitching. It does not take a lot to hold them in place. You don't want the glue to seep through, so 3 tiny little dots is really all you need. So I'm just making sure that all those holes line up. I'm putting my hanger in there and I will secure that with a little dot of glue as well. So this is between the 2 light aqua layers. And then for this one, I'll start in the center where my hanger is again. And this is a good way to kind of make sure that that hanger is secure. So just like all of the rest of them, that first stitch you want to start between the layers, and then after you have that one, you can sandwich them all together and go through all 4 of those layers of felt. Just making sure my little tail is out of the way, and then I will work my way around with this piece of floss. Again, I'm skipping every stitch, so I'm just going in and out, going through every hole, and I'll do the running stitch all the way around. And then I'll come back in the other direction. I do like the look of every other stitch a lot. I tend to do that often, especially this one looks really nice with that contrasting color. But I decided that I would fill the whole thing in once I got around to my starting point again. And you do have to make sure you don't catch your hanger accidentally as you stitch. So I'm back to my starting point. And I do like the look of it. I was kind of assessing the situation, but decided for this one, I am going to go ahead and fill it in and go back the other direction. Now I did run out of floss. I did not quite have enough to get all the way back around, which is always a little bit frustrating when this happens, but it's an easy fix. So I'm ending this piece by making sure I'm between my layers so that when I tie off a new one, it will get hidden. I did have this little scrap piece that I just grabbed because I only have like 4 or 5 stitches left. Now you want to make sure you go between. So I was coming from the back to the front, but I came out in between, and I want to make sure I'm going back in the same direction as if I still had one piece of floss. So you can see both of those tails are between my 2 layers in the middle. I'm just going to hold them. I don't want to tie them off just yet. Usually I'll do a few stitches and then tie them off, but since I really only had a few stitches on this one, I just stitched the rest of the way around and did both of my tie-offs at the same time. So I'm just finishing off the heart, back through, coming out in between those 2 middle layers with my tail. And then I have 2 sets of tails to tie off. So I'll tie off this one first. This is where I stopped and I started. I'll just tie it in 2 knots, pulling nice and tight so that it hides down in that little seam. And then I will thread each of these into my needle and pull them out through the back. It would be much more efficient to thread all 6 pieces at once, but it's kind of hard to do because they are different lengths. So for me, it's just easier just to do them individually. So here's one of the tails threaded through the back. And you can kind of manipulate the felt a little bit, make sure the very end where you snipped it off goes back into that felt. And then of course I'll do the same with this one. And I'll just repeat the same procedure with the 2 at the top where I ended. Tying it off, I like to tie it in 2 knots, pulling it nice and tight so it's down in between those layers, and then I will thread the tails back through between the layers and then out the back side. I like to do the back side just in case You can see it a little bit. At least it's not on the front where you've spent all that time embellishing and making it look nice and pretty. It is a lot easier to thread these when the tails are a little bit longer. But now they are all finished, and I just think they turned out so cute. So we have the basic heart with the lovely layers. They're really cute, just the basic heart, if you just wanted to make some hearts without all these embellishments. Then we have the scalloped and the floral details. I do like the scallop with just a plain heart as well, which you can see on the back. And then we have the Cupid arrow details, which I think are really fun. And there's what it looks like plain if you flip it over and don't add the extra embellishments. I hope you've enjoyed this video showing you how I made these cute little heartfelt ornaments using the Poshta Design stitching dies, and I hope you're inspired to make some of your own. Have an amazing day. Bye.